Okay, great. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you for your patience. We're now going to go into the final session, which is about things we buy. I've got three panellists with me. I've got Thomas here, who is an experienced sustainability professional, having worked for over a decade with the world's largest environmental organisations, including Greenpeace. He is founder and CEO of Canopey, the first online platform to completely streamline the sustainable shopping journey. I also have with me Maria, who used to campaign for ending ecocide on Earth, and she is also an educator and sustainability consultant. Welcome, Maria. She will speak about her own efforts to reduce the impact of caring for a baby on our natural life support systems. And last but not least, I have Steph with me, who you heard from earlier, who is a chartered environmentalist with over 15 years' experience across a variety of industries, including not-for-profit, engineering and design consultancy, construction and biotech. And she is founder and owner of So Sustainable. So I shall hand over first of all to Thomas. We'll have about 5 to 10 minutes each, and then we'll open up for Q&A. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for sticking around right to the end. Really appreciate it. I know how hard that is. We ran some events recently, and the tail end of the events are always like, no, don't go yet. There's one more talk. So it's great to see you. So I mean, a great little overview there, and just a bit more context to that is when I went to university and started working alongside some climate scientists at the Tyndall Centre for Climate Research up in Norwich. That's when I really started getting involved with the climate work and climate activism, but also working with those environmental organisations such as Greenpeace and the UN as well. Alongside that, and whilst I was doing that, I was working with other organisations and charities to really understand the barriers for individuals when it comes to living sustainably. We always so often talk about business change and the need for businesses to change, and that's absolutely true. But very often we forget that businesses run on what consumers demand and how consumers can access those businesses. So whilst it's great to change a business, if it doesn't make it more accessible for the consumer, then it's hard to adopt those changes. So a lot of that for me has been focused around that accessibility and convenience. I'm not going to give a huge talk here because I'd rather get into discussion and Q&A, but the one thing that I would like to say is that throughout the entirety of human existence, we've, sounds like I'm about to give a big talk now, but we've innovated for convenience throughout that history. And we have had 3 ages of metabolism. And what I mean by metabolism is the taking of resource from the earth, the consuming and use of that, and then the wasting of that resource as well. And many people and the media and many current government officials will tell you that climate movement and climate activists would like you to go back to the first age of metabolism, which is the hunter-gatherer age, which is where we simply take what we need to survive, live in caves or in the woods. But let's be real, you don't need to be a caveman to be sustainable. So it's completely ridiculous and very often just rhetoric to undermine the work that we're doing. The second age of metabolism was obviously the age of the agrarian age, which essentially is the farming age. We began to learn how to come together in communities like peas in a pod. We started consuming more, innovating more, expanding more, and this was all really exciting. But of course, with that came more waste as well. And at the time, we didn't really notice what damage that would lead to and continued to be excited by the innovations that we made for consumers and people, which was totally fine. And then, of course, we came into the third age, which always sounds very scary, but it's the age that was triggered by the Industrial Revolutions. And this is mass innovation, mass expansion, mass consumerism, fast consumerism, and of course, with that, mass waste. And this, as we've progressed through that Industrial Revolution around the world, obviously we've become more aware of the impacts we're having, and those sort of effects are becoming more stark across the world, and even now in countries such as the UK, where we traditionally wouldn't feel those effects, we are starting to more now. Of course, it sounds very depressing, and I always come back to the fact that this has always been about trying to make it easier for people to live, to access things, whether it's resources, and we've seen great innovation through that. Great healthcare, life expectancy has expanded, people's wealth generally across the world has gone up, even though the wealth gap has also increased. And fundamentally, that's all mostly good stuff, right? Like, we should be accepting that this is stuff that we can do as humans, and we should be able to do. The problem is that we need to move into a new age of metabolism, whereby we still look at the convenient ways in which we can live as consumers and access the things that we want as people, but at the same time with respect to the natural world that the same people in the hunter-gatherer age also had, but without sacrificing all of the great innovation that's come in that time. So for me, a lot of the work that I do, whether it's at Canopey, which is all about making it much easier to buy better and to trust that has been checked on those products, on those brands, rather than you having to go and do that research. We do it for you, and then you can buy those products. But also alongside that, with the work I do with Greenpeace, the UN, Friends of the Earth, Surfers Against Sewage, it's all about how can we move the needle to make it easier for individuals to live with the convenience they're used to, but without the impact. That's a little bit about me and what I focus on, but I'll pass over and then we can get into a bit more conversation.
Thank you very much indeed, Thomas. Steph, can I hand over to you now?
Hi again, everyone. So this time I'm going to talk about So Sustainable, which is the shop I created down in Watlington. So just a short trip down the N40 if you ever fancy coming to see us. We've got lots of refill stuff, just like Nothing But Footprints here in Bicester. We try and predominantly stock mostly organic, whole foods, for obvious reasons. You know, everything used to be organic, and then somehow along the way, organic became this premium product, and we're just trying to help people get back to that. Organic is real food, so we try and only stock organic where we can. We have all the fantastic Ceci refills, so people can bring their bottles, so they're not creating new plastic waste. And then we have lots of sustainable alternatives, a lot of the same stuff that I'm sure is on Canopey as well. So when we're choosing products that we want to stock, we obviously try and make sure they're organic where we can, including the ingredients that are in various beauty products and things. We always make sure there's no plastic, and we try and encourage circularity and biodegradability or compostability. Biodegradable tends to get a bit hijacked by people, so they make you think it's sustainable when it's really not. So we kind of want to encourage people to simplify their lives. You know, this whole drive for convenience is fantastic. As you know, someone with a full-time job, a business on the side, 2 little kids, convenience is key, right? And I do shop in supermarkets, and I do make compromises in where my money is and all this sort of stuff. And you have to pick and choose where you focus your effort, along with the knowledge and what impact those choices have. So, which is why events such as today are great to help you make those decisions. And the point of So Sustainable for me is to try and make sustainable food shopping and refill shopping that slightly bit more convenient for the community in and around Watlington. We do sell online as well, and we'll deliver through partners Velocity, based in Oxford, with an electric van and cargo bikes, and they're a fantastic company as well if anyone needs to look them up. But yeah, so that's So Sustainable. I don't really have anything else there.
Thank you very much, Steph. Short and sweet. Okay, over to Maria.
Yeah, so I have slides. Where's the clicker? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Thomas.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, so
If you hold the microphone up to your chin, Maria.
just let's see. Yeah. So hi, I'd like to share a few things that I've recently discovered as a new parent. First, I'll start with some kind of possibly quite obvious benefits of thinking about sustainability when you're a parent, and that is that taking your child out into nature actually educates them and makes it more likely that they will love and value nature when they're an adult. But I also discovered that as well as the physical activity and the mental health benefits of taking your child into nature, bright daylight makes it less likely that they will wear sunglasses, because, not sunglasses, I'm sorry, misspoke, glasses, as in eye correction. Because the bright sunlight, the bright daylight helps eye development, helps shape the eyeball in a way that you don't need glasses until much later in life. So yeah, that is on the point of things we buy, so we would need less of that small thing, glasses. So which button? That button, okay. Yeah, so there are two more things that I will speak about. One of them is how to get clothes more sustainably. That possibly includes adults as well, but also nappies. Okay, so these are the benefits of taking your child out to nature. And then the clothes, which is one of the big things that we waste. Child and adult clothes all end up in landfill or end up in our bins. I was very shocked to discover that a lot of parents actually bin their children's clothes because they don't know what to do with them, and that's a real shame. It is possible to get very nice, very almost new second-hand clothes from online marketplaces, and also now there's a company that rents baby clothes, and I'll mention that in a minute. Yeah, of course, there are other ways of getting clothes more sustainably, but organic cotton is kind of expensive. But other fibers, such as bamboo and hemp, are also quite nice. They are useful for blankets and nappies. So, yeah, even though you might personally not have any baby clothes, you could, yeah, it's something that every parent should be helped with to pass the clothes on to people who need it, or even just resell online. So the clothes rental, I was quite surprised to come across that. It's a business that won some sustainability awards recently. It is called Super Looper, as in closing the loop of product use waste. So the single linear model is taken into a circular model. So what they do is just rent out quite nice brands of baby clothes, again in very, very almost new condition. And that the one benefit of that is obviously that you then don't have to deal with, oh, how do I sell them on or do I pass them on? No, you just send them back and they are looped and looped again with other parents. And yeah, I'm really happy with that. I've just had a shipment of really cute baby clothes. My daughter, if you saw her earlier, was wearing one outfit from that box. So then my third point is about nappies. Yes, disposable nappies are awfully wasteful. A baby goes through about 5,000 nappy changes from birth to potty, and that can cost about £1,000 at current prices. And of course, most disposable nappies end up in landfill or the incinerator. So a lot of the nappies that were manufactured decades ago are still festering somewhere in a landfill site and contributing to microplastic pollution somewhere down the line when they partly degrade. And of course, we don't like that. What is the alternative? Again, we're not going back to the cave. We're not modern nappies. The reusable nappies that are currently available on the market are really cute and really easy to use. They are nothing like what they used to be. They're made of materials that are easy to wash, and overall, the way that they washed is a lot less damaging to the environment, even including all the energy costs and the water use of all the washing that they need. And yes, they save money. The kit, as I've put down there, the kit can cost anything between 100 and 500 pounds, so half the price or much less than that of disposables. And with all the washing costs included, that is still cheaper. Somebody's done the spreadsheet. I'm not going to show you the spreadsheet. And yeah, surprisingly, the reusable nappies do not cause nappy rash. So another cost saving, if you use disposables, you have to buy nappy creams, whereas reusables do not require nappy cream. And again, they're easy to use and efficient. They don't have to be boiled like maybe our parents used to, or grandparents. And there are ways to save even more carbon by washing them at night, or basically avoiding the evening peak of energy when it's the most carbon intensive. Okay, so yeah, that is my talk. Yes, I'm sure there's a lot more things to say about sustainable parenting, but this is what I picked. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. I'll just add a few different points. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself at the start. I'm Caroline. I'm a counsellor from Newbury, so I'm a bit of a long way from home today, but it's great to be with you. There's a few things that we do down in Newbury that you may well do around here as well. Repair cafes, for example, is another way that you can save on expenditure. You can get garden tools, bikes, electricals, etc. Fixed, so that prolongs their life. Obviously, we've got charity shops. We've got second-hand clothing warehouses now where you can go and buy things. And often people buy something in a sale, never actually wear it, and it's as good as new. So you can get, a beautiful dress or something just for a £5 or a £10 now, which is fabulous. You can also get recyclable clothing. I've actually put a jumper on because I'm quite cold, but I don't know if you saw the jumper t-shirt I was wearing earlier from the RSPB. A lot of the charities now, including Butterfly Conservation and the wildlife trusts, they all use a similar company that produces recyclable t-shirts, and when they're worn out you can actually send them back and recycle them and get money off your next t-shirt purchase. So there's a lot of these kinds of things happening now, and you can get some really nice stuff at good value. So that's just a few extra ideas from me that I throw into the pot. Amanda, would you like to take one of the microphones for us, and we'll take some questions from the floor. Thank you.
Whilst we're just waiting for some questions to come up, I think fundamentally one of the biggest things that comes up with sustainable shopping in general is often the conversation of clothing. And of course, the most sustainable that you can be is to buy secondhand. But there are many, many products on the market that we have to buy which can't be bought secondhand. I don't think anyone in here is going to go and buy a secondhand deodorant, roll-on deodorant, or a secondhand foundation, or a secondhand cleaning product. But you can buy refills and refillables for many of these things. So one of the things at Canopey, which we really focus on, is looking at the product's entire life cycle. So instead of just going, okay, what was the materials or the impact that this has now, and then obviously at waste, also thinking about, well, how long does it actually last? And in terms of, does it need to be thrown away at all? Can it just be reused? So many of the cleaning products, cosmetic products, etc., you actually only ever need to buy the initial product once. And then you can just buy these refills, which not only saves consumers money, but also has a drastically lower environmental impact over its lifetime. A good example that I always use, and I always bring my water bottle on stage for this, is that one of these costs anywhere between depending on what type of materials it's made from, but a good one will cost you anywhere between 20 and 45 pounds. So it can be quite expensive to buy a reusable water bottle, but that's an initial purchase point. If you compare this to the amount of single-use plastic bottles that this replaces over its lifetime, it's about 1,470. 1,470 times the price of a single-use plastic bottle is far, far, far more than even the highest price of one of these, being £45. So what we often say at Canopey is, if you can make one of these purchases every quarter, every 6 months, every year, you're making a huge change as an individual. But if millions of people made those same changes, the impact that we're having and the money that you're saving as an economy, but also impact as a consumer, is drastically less. So clothing is really important, and buying secondhand is really important. But for those products where you can't buy secondhand, think about that reusability, circularity, and refillability. Just a quick thing whilst we are waiting for some hands to go up, although I haven't seen any go up in that time. So
Thank you for that, Thomas. Any questions? Yeah.
The whole fashion industry is tremendously wasteful, isn't it? I know that a huge number of garments go into landfill before they even reach the shops. How can we raise awareness of that and encourage people not to buy so much, basically?
I think just quickly on that, and then I'll let you guys come in on that as well, but it's just one of the things that I think is really important is the trust element, right? Like if you're going to go and buy clothes, and you are going to put thought in, which is often the thing that we need people to be doing. But the reason that a lot of people don't do this is because they're often being lied to by big retailers on what their sustainability claims are, what their ethics are on a social supply chain. And I think what fundamentally needs to come in is regulation about sort of what can be made and how it's made and where it's made and all of these different things. But whilst we wait for that, you need companies which are not only calling that out, so NGOs, charities, for-profit organizations, but also startups and companies which are offering you alternatives. So recently H&M were found out they have like a take back clothing scheme, and most people think that that's brilliant because they can buy their cheap fast fashion clothes from H&M and then take their fast fashion clothes back to H&M and it will be repurposed, right? But no, over 75% of that in that take back scheme was found to go to landfill, mostly in Africa, which was obviously abhorrent, but also most people had absolutely no idea until that report came out. Those of us who work in the industry may have already known that that was happening and have been shouting about it all we want. But the point is that until we see more transparency, we see more regulation on what they can say, and we're starting to see that. Regulation has come out on green claims. So the Competition and Markets Authority in the UK released the Green Claims Code in 2021, meaning that every green claim that you now see either has to have transparency around it. So Coca-Cola can't say we use recycled plastic with no transparency about how much they use. It's less than 1%, by the way, in all of their bottles. 100 billion plastic bottles every year. 1% recycled plastic isn't very much. So this new regulation is fantastic because it's stopping these companies, or it's going to at least make them have to be transparent about it, and then they're going to get fined if not. The problem is those fines are quite small. So what happens is they just budget in, like, okay, we're going to get fined for saying this, but hey, the sales will get better. So what we need to see is that change, firstly, and then secondly is alternatives that make it convenient to avoid the fast fashion. If you go for a fast fashion piece of clothing for someone who lives in low economic background, it's not easy to convince them to go and spend £50 rather than £10 on a pair of jeans or whatever it is. So we really need to think about the behavioral shift just in terms of how we talk about these things, that they last longer, the better quality, but also just the accessibility to and affordability of those as well over time. Clothing's an incredibly complicated and challenging issue because clothes will always be more expensive if they're more ethical, because you have to pay people better, you have to use better materials, and those things aren't going to come down no matter how much we want. So yeah, just my piece on that, but I'm sure these guys have.
That kind of feeds into something I forgot to say earlier, is that as a small business that is trying to promote sustainable products, I find the whole marketing piece extremely difficult to grapple with. I'm trying to get people to buy less stuff, but I'm also trying to run a business, a not-for-profit business, mind you, but I haven't got the answer for that one. But everything Thomas said, absolutely spot on. These companies are behaving very immorally, and it's the true cost of things is what these ethical and sustainable clothing companies, and amongst others, that's the true cost. the cost is being outsourced in other ways, social, environmental ways, with all these fast fashion things. It's, you know, a 50 pence top or whatever it is, that's not how much that thing costs to produce. Somebody is being exploited somewhere, or some natural processes. So it's for people that have the privilege to make those choices, to buy the more expensive things. Absolutely do the research and invest in more sustainable alternatives. And Patagonia is a great company. They're doing great things. There's loads of companies out there that are doing really good things. And secondhand, as you said, Tom, you know, he's nailed all the points and said them much better than I could. But yeah, secondhand it should always be the first option for most people, I think.
Can I say something? Well, secondhand just sounds a bit like, oh, okay, don't want to do that. But if you call it vintage, a lot of people buy in. So yeah, vintage is possibly the most sustainable way of getting clothes, especially thinking about that the fact that a lot of these clothes were bought and then maybe worn once and forgotten about until they were dug up and you know, put on sale by a vintage retailer. And yeah, that it's definitely, how do we change behavior? I don't know. I've been trying for a decade, since I was a campaigner at the Ecoside. But yeah, apart from sharing our own experiences and making it clear that the most obvious choice is usually not even the best one, as in the case of nappies. There are so many side benefits to reusable nappies that yeah, people never think about. But yeah, just sharing our experiences is the thing that everyone can do.
I think that's absolutely on it as well. Like, so Canopey, our sort of tagline is the home for buying better. It's not the home for buying sustainable. It's not the home for buying eco-friendly. It's not the home for buying zero waste. It's the home for buying better. And because better can encompass lots of different things: better lifetime, better materials, better social policies, better products, you know, better made, lots and lots of things which you can then put into marketing and the way you talk about these things to encourage people to buy better products. And that can be everything from environmental, social, or governance. And the other thing I was just pick up on as well is that I'm going to say something controversial, sitting next to sort of secondhand clothing sort of markets, but secondhand will still have an end of life at some point, particularly if they're fast fashion secondhand. So it's brilliant that we've seen apps and websites like Depop and Vinted and eBay really take off, and places to resell these or to then give away, or charity shops or whatever it is. But fundamentally, those products are still going to end up somewhere at the end of the point. So we're just delaying it, ultimately. And that's still a problem. So whilst we talk about buying, absolutely, but also what we should be doing as well is talking about, well, what happens at the end. And, you know, fundamentally, that's a government thing. You know, we have seen reports of less than 10% of plastic goes actually through recycling. So as much as we want to say we're doing our bit by recycling, the government is undermining you and then shipping it off to Turkey and Malaysia and lots of different places. And that includes fashion as well. So I think it's a two-sided conversation. What are we buying to begin with? Yes, buy secondhand for clothing, but then also make sure that we're having that conversation about what am I going to do at the end of this? You know, and if you're the one who gets to the end of life of that thing, what do you do then? Because it can't then be sold again because it's ripped or broken or whatever. You could repair it, but if it's fast fashion, the fibers are crap. You know, so you've got to, there's lots of weighing things. For a consumer, nightmare. This is why convenience, as each one of us have said, is so important, because if you ask people to put all this effort in and to radically change the time that they're putting into doing all this stuff, you can forget it. Most consumers aren't going to. Yeah, the really climate conscious ones will, but realistically most people aren't. So yeah, it's a two-sided conversation.
See, Tom?
I was delighted recently. Hanover Dairies have now started a delivery service where they're using glass bottles, and we're not having to get rid of plastic anymore, which is marvellous.
Should we take Tom's question as well? Thank you.
I suppose my question is, you know, in the ideal world, what kind of governmental legislation would you want to see put in place to tackle this problem? Because I think that there is societal kind of like demand, and there's a lot of young people which are coming through, which are wanting to see change in this space. And I suppose I've just been really, it's just really interesting to know like how it's so complex. What would be your top 2 or 3 things you would have government do to make sure that this area changed?
Yes, I mentioned the campaign for ending ecocide. The EU are about to adopt ecocide as a crime. They are actually about to make it a crime. Of course, that is one little part of what is being done by governments. Unfortunately, many governments don't really enforce anything against environmental crimes. So yeah, I would say enforcement is my top government action.
I think circularity would be it for me. If you produce a product, you have to have a way for that product to be re-engineered, repurposed, recycled, whatever it is. You can't just put any old crap out there and make it somebody else's problem. I don't know how you legislate that, but I'm sure there's a way.
Thank you.
I was going to say the first one, and then after the first one was said, I was going to say the second one. So the third one would probably be to do with the materials that products are made from and regulation on what can be used and what can't be used. You know, petroleum-based materials, just put a ban in place. You don't need to use them anymore. There's far better materials. And I think fundamentally, it's less about, I mean, policy is really important. All of these are important. It's never one silver bullet, unfortunately. But actually, fundamentally, the thing from government and from sort of like private money as well is investment into new materials, into and sort of like how those materials then decompose and whatever else. Because if you're innovating, and hopefully all of this is tech-enabled, and I say that tentatively because I know there's some reservations around tech being the solution, but actually, if you think about the solution being that tech-enabled resource intensity or materiality then allows you to have materials which are compostable, they decompose, they are circular in nature of being a material, and therefore the product is circular in nature because it goes back to being in nature. Fundamentally, what that means is that you could produce products with a similar price point because you're not having to rely on huge amounts of human labor, which then allow consumers to access products of better impact for what they want, and the end of life is solved. So fundamentally, it needs to be an investment thing, and it needs to be a government sort of enforced investment. You know, this amount of investment needs to go into X every year, or whatever. That's where I would go.
Thank you very much. And did anyone have anything they wanted to say in response to the lady's question here about the glass bottles?
I think glass bottles are great. I think glass bottles are only great if they're refillable and reusable. There's no point in someone sending you a glass bottle if then you have to chuck it away. I also think that we often, the longer term goal is that it shouldn't matter. So I'd start as there, and then that will make sense for what I say next, is that glass bottles are heavier and take up more space, so therefore in distribution and current supply chain logistics, it increases carbon emissions because of the amount of sort of weight and capacity that is needed globally for them. However, the reason I said the initial bit was because the idea is that we're electrifying and running all of that electric on renewable eventually, right? So therefore it shouldn't matter over time. So fundamentally, yes, I agree, 100%. At this point in time, I'm very wary just of like completely shifting the economy to like those sorts of solutions because the rest of the economy and other sectors aren't there yet. But as a long-term goal, it shouldn't matter how heavy or how much space something takes because fundamentally the distribution should be renewable in itself. But that's more of a long-term goal, so it'll take some time.
Thank you. Any more questions? Tom's got another one.
Go on, Tom.
So one of the things which I had for the Net Positive Life app was that I was thinking like, okay, I can do the carbon impact of things, right? Because it's kind of easy to measure the impact of kind of waste and the carbon impact around waste and the weightage of waste. But the thing which I really wanted to include was the impact on nature of things. And like, there's always part of the extraction, but then I also think there should also almost be a measure of like the impact on nature from the waste. Like, you know, something's, you know, there's plastic going into the water, there's plastic going into landfill. You know, have you got any insights that you could share on how I might do that?
I mean, I can just quickly, just on a very quick point, is that we so often talk about the climate crisis and we so often only think about carbon in that, but without getting into all the science around it, you know, we're actually in a planetary crisis. All of our planetary boundaries are at risk. One of those is biodiversity. And of course, if we don't consider that, it doesn't really matter how much carbon we push into the air if we're still destroying the entire natural world. So I absolutely agree. I don't have an answer for you. However, what I would say on a positive note at the end of that is that investors, companies, regulations, frameworks are now adapting to include biodiversity loss or biodiversity impact. We're so early in that, and it needs to be quicker, as with anything. But yes, it's going to come. I wish it would come quicker, but I don't have an answer.
There's something called ecological footprinting. That's an extension to carbon footprinting. As you are aware, carbon footprinting is kind of easy to quantify. Yeah, kind of easy. That there's lots of elements to it. It's not straightforward, but it's been done. With ecological footprinting, we have to include things like biodiversity, we have to include water use, we have to include land use and land use change, and all these things that have an impact on our natural environment. But it gets really complex. So it's really not straightforward to do it in a single spreadsheet and measure and come up with a number that could be communicated easily. So yeah, there are people do PhDs in things like that, and yes, I'm sure there'll be some sort of improvement on how the impact of our stuff is communicated, but we're really not there yet.
Yeah, I think actually it's just a sort of like a bit of an ego boost, but Canopey, we have an impact calculator which we built into our platform, so we quantify the embedded carbon emissions of a product and what that is against a mainstream product, so you can see what you're saving. But not just carbon emissions, we're also looking at water use as well. And it's just the first step of data that we're going to be building in as we grow and to account for those things. The way to do that is incredibly complex, as said, and I think that the only way that can be done is for LCA data on materials, so life cycle analysis data on materials globally, to be made public and accessible for everyone without having to pay ridiculous fees to access these things, which is currently the way it's done. It's a business for people, but like, how are we going to improve if everyone can't afford it? So I agree. It's definitely complex, but yeah, a little thing is, you know, Canopey has already started doing that.
Yeah, just to add and echo what everyone else said, carbon footprinting has been done to a globally established standard for a few decades now. And as Thomas said, we're right early on in accounting for nature. So once we figure out how that, we'll get to a point where we can do it. And because at carbon now, you equate carbon to cost. Whenever I'm talking to our board about carbon, I'm putting it up there next to the pounds and the pence. And like, this is a cost. It's not an environmental thing. This should be on your balance sheet. We need to think about it in the same way that we do our annual accounts and all of that. And we will get there with nature. We're just not quite there yet. You know, we talk about tons CO2e. It's not. That was a process we went through to get to what that E means. So we'll have nature units or something eventually. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Any more questions? Yes, lady just here.
It's just a local thing, I think, but on Sainsbury's packaging, they used to just say, this, you know, you can recycle this at our store, and sometimes they'd say, don't recycle. And that was a very restricted type of plastic packaging. But with Alarm, I've seen that they're putting the green label, you know, recycle at our store on a whole range of plastic packaging. And I don't know how to, I was thinking, should I get to the head office of Sainsbury's and say, well, what are you doing? You know, how is it that you've changed this? And then I was looking about Viridor, which is our local incinerator, basically. I mean, it's called an energy recovery facility, but actually they're burning all our rubbish that can't be recycled. They do generate energy, electricity from that. But I've noticed they're opening up a new facility at Avonmouth, where they say they're going to be doing more recovery of plastics from the waste that goes to the recycling place, or the Viridor thing. And I didn't know whether perhaps Sainsbury's, whether they were planning to use this, but I don't know, because the plastics are such a wide range of plastics.
So there's organisations called TerraCycle, and there's Refactory. There's a few of them popping up now, and they're all working on innovative ways to recycle hard-to-recycle plastics, and they're generally turning it into either insulation boards or plastic furniture, those kind of things. And I suspect Sainsbury's has a contract with TerraCycle to process those kind of plastics into those sorts of things. But I think your point, it's really important to ask those questions and not just to accept what people are saying. I was in a meeting the other day about a new polystyrene compactor that the science park we're based on is bringing in for everyone, which is great. But I said, what's happening to this compact? And they were like, oh, well, they're buying it back and then recycling it. I'm like, into what? And they're like, oh, we'll find out before we do it. And I'm like, it's really important, because you could... They might not be doing something beneficial with it, and you might just be putting more energy into processing it to end up in a worse situation. So asking those questions, particularly around waste, I think are really, really important. But there are companies out there innovating, and hopefully that's only going to pick up speed and become more and more accessible to more people.
Yeah, on the point of supermarkets, you may have noticed that the packaging isn't the same as it used to be. It used to be black trays, there used to be polystyrene trays for a lot of goods, but that is no longer the main type of packaging that you see. And that is why a lot of packaging can now be recycled. Does it actually get recycled is another question. So I'm not saying that, yeah, they've done all they can and, you know, it's all good, but they have made steps to remove the worst types of plastics for recycling, polystyrene being one of them. And yeah, so just, yeah, small actions from the supermarkets. Give them credit where credit is due.
Surfers Against Sewage and Greenpeace and a bunch of other environmental organisations released their top 10 polluters of plastic, and that's based on sort of data of where that plastic goes. They release it every year. I think they might have just released their most recent one. It's good to see, because you'll be able to see which supermarkets are on that list. Tesco, terrible, never go there. But you know, it will allow you to have at least a sort of like standardised, I definitely can't trust this company, but I can trust or at least try to trust. I think what it comes down to again, though, is that you shouldn't have to be the expert, and like you shouldn't have to go and do, you know, a PhD in this stuff. You shouldn't have to go and have to work with people at the Grantham Institute or whatever to understand this stuff. You shouldn't have to come here and have to us to like try and explain it when we might not even know. So I think like the problem is twofold. One is that organisations like Tesco, Sainsbury's, other supermarkets, but also just other companies in general, like Amazon or whatever else, are not stupid and are aware that people are more inclined to buy products with a green claim on them. So we'll slap a green claim on them and you'll buy it because you'll go, great, like it's got a green claim on it, fantastic, I feel good about myself. But in many cases it's been exposed that this is just greenwashing and not true. It's not to say that it's never true. Like absolutely, like you know, Sainsbury's and other organisations have made steps. They are moving very slowly. And then the other side of it is government. You know, okay, great. A supermarket could implement all of this great stuff that you then bring all your plastic to them, put it in their box, and they say that they'll get it recycling, and then they work with supply chain recyclers to get that done if they're not working with someone like TerraCycle or someone else. But then where's the government sending that recycling to? Well, plastic packaging, less than 10% of it is being recycled. So, fundamentally, it shouldn't be your responsibility. You should be able to just you should be able to trust what's on there. And I would encourage you to trust, ultimately, because as much as we need to call this out, and you can change where you shop, at Canopey, nothing ever has an accreditation or a recycling icon on it unless it's been verified by primary evidence, and we have hard evidence behind everything. We're the only marketplace globally to put evidence behind every single green claim, which makes us the only online marketplace globally to be compliant with new green claims regulation. So you can go to places like this, but fundamentally, you still want to shop in supermarkets. That's why supermarkets exist. It's easy. Go down the road, your local supermarket. So I think question it, but regulation will change as people change, as that pressure grows, and it will get there. And then eventually you will be able to trust at some point. But it's great that you're raising these questions and querying it, because that will allow these conversations to be had. I would write to them. You said, should I write to them? Why not? Send them an email. It doesn't, they might ignore you. But if 100, 1,000, 100,000, a million people write an email thinking they're going to get ignored, they can't ignore 100,000 people emailing their CEO or whatever, right? So I would just say, your voice has power, even if it feels quite small with one person. So question it, ask the question, but again, fundamentally try and find those places where you just know you can trust that that's been checked. And then if you need, you're not going to be a perfect consumer. If you need to get something which isn't on that verified site, then go to your supermarket and hope that you can trust. I guess that's the only advice we can have at this point. Hope that helps.
Thank you very much, everyone. Any more questions? Yes, lady over there.
Around the big pillar.
Well, as an answer, really, a colleague of mine did ask Sainsbury's what happens to the soft plastics, and they were told, can't tell you, it's a commercial secret. So very much doubt that they're doing good things with it. But I have heard that Co-op and Waitrose are doing the kind of garden furniture type recycling with the plastic that you give there, but I wouldn't trust any of the other supermarkets myself.
Yeah, I agree. Generally, Waitrose, Waitrose, Co-op, M&S up to a point, but mainly Waitrose and the Co-op are probably your best bets for local supermarkets. Tesco, Sainsbury's, Aldi, Lidl, everyone else. Unfortunately, they're often the cheaper ones, but yeah, they don't necessarily trust them.
Any more questions? I will just say something about council waste collection. I know the government have got some regulations coming in to try and rationalise what councils take away, because often people find it very confusing about what's taken away in each area, and if they move around the country they suddenly find that they can't recycle glass anymore but they can recycle more plastics, or vice versa, and you often see at the roadside people are putting the wrong things into the bins. So there is some kind of government regulations that are supposed to be coming in. Whether or not they do come in and how long it takes remains to be seen. But obviously that is the right direction of travel to try and make it a lot easier for people to recycle. If everyone can recycle the same things, then it's much more easy to understand.
In my previous life, be it working with Greenpeace and Surfers Against Sewage and the UN and various other organisations, these are the companies which are going to create that change for you as a consumer. So support them, please support them. People often lob all sort of environmental organizations together as disruptive activists, and some people love that disruption and support it. Great, good for them. Other people don't, and then drop off their support from every of those organizations. Greenpeace don't disrupt normal people. They're only ever targeting companies and governments, and they are always pushing through and lobbying for those sorts of changes. So become a member of Greenpeace. Great, fantastic. But these are, for others who aren't, and other organizations, Friends of the Earth, Surfers Against Sewage, you can't be members of everyone, but the point is sign their petitions, show up, use the emails that they send you templates for. As much as it can take time and as much as it can feel like nothing, the reason that Greenpeace has won so many of its campaigns over the last 52 years is because of people. They're an independent organization. They don't receive government money. They don't go with other companies. They only get supported by individuals, and they will remain true to the cause. And they'll also apologize when they make a mistake, which I love, because most companies wouldn't. So, if you're supporting those organizations, that sort of policy where governments say, we're going to bring in regulation, and then 10 years later still haven't, which we saw with various other plastic policies, and don't get me started on current delays for policy when we've been campaigning for years on these things and whatever. But the point is that these organizations are the ones which can take them to court and get pressure, and yeah, it's going to make it change quicker if we support them.
Okay, great. We've got time for one or two more questions, and then we'll wrap up. Anybody else who hasn't spoken yet? No? Okay, great. Well,
everything answered.
Everything answered. Everything's covered. We know all the answers now. So thank you very much indeed to Maria, Steph and Thomas for this last session. And thank you for staying until the end to listen to what they've had to say as well. I'd like to hand over to Tom now to say a few words.
So thank you very much. And I suppose I just want to say thank you very much to all of the panelists, and thank you very much for coming here and for everyone's time and volunteering to make this happen. It's a community effort. This is the reason we can make this stuff happen, is because we get communities together who can help share information, and we get some experts in and some residents who are happy to talk about their experiences. And that storytelling, that optimistic attitude, that can-do attitude which we have within our communities is the thing which should unlock real change. Because if we all embrace that, and we're all able to embrace that, and we're able to encourage other people with new information and new insight and tools and new different products and changes which we can make in our own life, then we can create a wave of change across our country and specifically in Bicester. And I'm sorry we're not able to kind of finish on our last session as how we can make a more sustainable Bicester, but I'm sure everyone has probably felt as if we've covered that subject quite well. And those which have been here listening to all the talks have, probably ingested enough. I mean, I sit in the audience and I listen, and I find it much more difficult to listen than to talk. So thank you very much for listening, because that's a very, very hard exercise. And then the last thing is to say a massive thank you to everyone who's helped put this on, from all of the stallholders who've come, to all of the community groups who've brought things. I think there hasn't really been a plug for Bicester Green. I'm chair of Bicester Green. Unfortunately, we couldn't get either of their staff members to come and sit on the panels because they're both away and they work tirelessly to make things happen at Bicester Green. But it's a fantastic organisation, and it's bringing volunteers together to take all those goods which we might otherwise throw away to actually make sure they get reused and brought back into the community, and people get access to goods and services which they might actually find very difficult. And there's bikes, there's electrical goods which have had a lifetime before, there's all different types of things to be found at Bicester Green. We're very, very proud about all the work streams we're taking in. Laptops from businesses which might be thrown away, and we're reusing them, and those have been given back out to the community. And we're going about taking in wood products which might otherwise be thrown away, and we're taking them in to be used in other ways. That community of people which has helped build that is so important within Bicester, because it's helping enable people to make these changes more easily. And we're very pleased to have the zero waste shop in there as well. So please come in. If you've got time to volunteer, please get involved with Bicester Green. We rely on the volunteers, it's volunteer powered. Anyway, that's enough of a plug for Bicester Green. But Daniel, thank you very much for all your AV support. It's been incredible. We wouldn't have been able to do it without you, and thank you very much for your professional support, because it's been absolutely vital. Thank you very much for everyone who's helped with the servery. Thank you very much for the Cherwell Collective helping with the food. Thank you very much for Bicester Bug helping us distribute so many leaflets. Thank you for all of the Green Party members who delivered 4,500 leaflets, and Bicester Bug who helped deliver 4,500 leaflets to make sure this is a well-publicised event. We've worked tirelessly to try and make this happen, and we've done it on a really small budget. But it's because of the community we've made it happen, and I hope we can do it in future years. And then there's one other big thank you to Amanda thank you for bringing everyone together. Thank you very much. And Amanda only started with me in June, but she's been amazing. It's one of her first jobs. She's learnt a hell of a lot. It's been very stressful for her, dealing with me, who's trying to do all these crazy things. So I'm very grateful for her, and it wouldn't have happened otherwise. Okay, and yeah, big round of applause for everyone, and thank you, everyone.
Tom as well. Tom is a force of nature, I think. I've known Tom for a number of years now. I used to work with him at the Wildlife Trust, and I think he's a visionary without wanting to be too hyperbolic. You know, I've worked with him on a number of projects now, and he really has got, you know, tremendous energy. So I think we owe him a debt of gratitude, and hopefully we can have something like this again in future years.
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you very much. And if whoever can stay around to help us pack up, that would be very, very welcome. Thank you very much indeed.